forget, and they could hear what we're doing. Oh, okay, now that's just the transcript coming up here. All right, so we're here on the 7th evening in PM331, PS 631. And if we had more people to preach, which we don't this year, that'd be part of what we do tonight. They'd finish preaching, but we all got done last week. And as a result, just 3 of us, we had some good feedback, I think, unless you had some questions about the sermon. That'd be one question, but then we're gonna talk about narratives and make sure you see the sign up sheet, which you've done, but the other guys sign up, because then this week for assignments, now by the schedule that I have printed out there, that extra schedule, not the end of the syllabus, that's not detailed enough. So go to the syllabus page and the schedule there. For next week, session 8, it just says out to the right, sermon number 2, exegetical outline. But yet I should have put down the sermon / exegetical / sermon outlines. Here's an option. As you look down further on the schedule, the 17th, we don't meet, fall study break. We come back on the 24th and you preach. So as you look through the schedule, after you preach, the next week you have exegetical outline for number 3. You come ready to preach with your sermon outline. Number 4, you come with your exegetical, and then you bring your sermon outline when you preach. But next week you have an opportunity, if you get far enough with your exegetical and you want to start laying out a sermon outline, just a tentative draft or what you think, we can look at those before, so that then you have a week off and then you come back and preach. But and the same thing with, and I'm saying this for everybody, the same thing for all the other weeks. If you get far enough and get your exegetical done and you want to start into your sermon outline, great. So that then we could discuss it a little bit. And then that last week you flesh it out, practice it, and come and preach with it. If you don't have enough time, come with your exegetical for sure. We'll process it a little bit. How would you preach that? And then you come back on the Tuesday that we preach, present your sermon outline then. So you look down the schedule, and I've circled the days we're going to preach. We're going to meet in class. Next week, we meet online. The 24th, we'll meet in class. The week after that, we'll just meet online. Week after that, we'll meet in class on November 7th. Week after that, we'll meet online and then have a week off for Thanksgiving. Come back on the 28th after Thanksgiving, meet in class, week off, back in class, we're done. Is what it really works out to. So look that through, and guys, anybody, let me know a question that you have. I've posted in Canvas here. Now let me share in Canvas. Announcements. All right, can you see that announcement page there, Ben?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so you can see down, just go to announcements there to the left. And yours might look a little different, but it's have the same things down the left-hand side. And you see there's sermon 1, 2, 3. Sermon 3, sign up and let me know. And you can see out to the right, this is the instructors page. And, that's when you responded and signed up. But everybody can let me know what passage, just so we're not preaching the same passage there. And Luke, it's a parable in Luke. Look down and see what are the Psalms. And I've just selected some of the shorter Psalms, so you're not doing like Psalm 119. There's no way, 175 verses. But a couple of them are a little longer. And then same thing with the Christmas passage. So look ahead, sign up for as you want, and then I'll make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes and planning ahead. That'd be pretty good. Back here. Stop sharing. But let me finish that. The sign-up sheets are all the same. They're just broken out. You just let me know, reply to those announcements as to which one you'd like to focus on and preach. And then I'll fill that in as quickly as I can so everybody can see what others have signed up. In fact, there's just 3 of us. We shouldn't be too much of an issue like we did with that first one. Question, Ben? Question you could ask for everybody?
Yeah. Well, just I probably would be able to answer myself, but just quickly, on those sign up for passages, are those locked until a certain time, or can we just pick those out?
No, they're
Okay.
open. I encourage you to
Okay.
go. Announcements are not locked.
Okay.
If I've, to
Sounds
me,
good.
there'd be a red dot out here on the side. I think if you can't see them, and
Okay.
there's no red dots anymore. I've gotten rid of everything.
Sounds good.
They don't have a wait till date, I don't think. Let me look here like on John. Open it up. Yeah, see, it doesn't show me that there's an option for me to, have it at, well, I've never seen a date.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
red button would be out there if that's not, I didn't even, let me go to edit. See if that changes that. I'm sorry, I didn't look at it right. Users do not receive updated notifications when editing announcement.
I
You
think
need to create
it'll
what?
be.
Cool.
I just looked at the seasonal Christmas one, and it's open for me to reply on that
Good.
one, so it'll be good.
Delay posting. See, I've never used this delay posting. And then
Huh.
it gives me a date. I've never used that. So once I make an announcement, it's there, is my understanding. Unless
Okay.
I do that, but I've never done never done it. So shoot. Hey, now there's another question. Where did you see on the assignments? Did you ever have a problem trying to reload a file? I remember Ethan saying that. And I couldn't see a, let me go down to one of them. I think it was the outlines. And if
You
I
said
hit
reload a
edit,
file, like
yeah,
submit it again.
you loaded a draft and you want to come back and upload like your preaching outline here.
I think
Now
I
I
was able to on that.
reload.
I can look, but I think I was able to.
Yeah, I think Ethan said something. So I'm just showing you what I see here. Oh, no, wait, I didn't share. Let me go back. Um, Stop sharing. Oh, I want to go back and share. All right, so I'm in the outline for James. There's the instructions. I'm in the edit mode. As you can see, I select what category it is, what points it is. Don't count this assignment towards the final grade. No, it does go toward the final grade. External tool. Now, see, that's the thing that's different this time. I'm using Turnitin all over because that's what Dr. Bittner's wanting us all to use. Load this tool, but there's no option there for not seeing. So this is what submission attempts, allowed attempts, unlimited. So you should be in the other options limited number of attempts. No, they were all unlimited. So another class said the same thing to me, Ben. So if you ever run into that you can't resubmit for some reason, let me know. That'd help me. Or just move on and do what you need to do for life. Notify users that the content's changed. No, I didn't change the content here. So I don't see what you all were talking about. And I looked around through, I thought everything. Cool. Not cool, but we'll see. And let me say it for everybody as you're watching the video, Ethan, Eli, you ever get stuck, can't upload something, either send it to me in a chat here in the inbox, just make it an attachment there, or send it to me in an email. Best for you is I send it into Canvas because then it's there and doesn't get lost in my email inbox. Meaning usually it gets buried with all the other emails I get. A lot of them are junk emails, and from just all the junk that you get in an email account. We even get them at Calvary. Other questions, Ben? Maybe, or did that not answer?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so the rest of the class, I'm going to do some more, just a little bit of lecture about editing and revising next time. And that's pretty much it when it comes to the textbook, Robinson's textbook, because he has a little information about what to look for when you're revising your outline, looking back through it and studying it. Well, let's talk about John for a little bit. When you shift to narrative, I have a handout. So you go down to the sermon outline narrative assignment, and you see it's got preaching narratives, a handout, and then the assignment preparation, and then the template doc. So this first one on preaching narratives, yeah, that's got some information with each of them. I used a book by, I can't remember the name. Got the book before I met the guy, met him at a preaching conference at Moody one year. And what he did, he devoted a different chapter to each genre of scripture, how to preach narratives, how to preach parables, how to preach poetry. So I've just taken from his handout and some others that I've run to through the years. And I've cobbled from Dr. Miller's notes. He taught this class before I got here. So I think this narrative one has a lot of his material in it from Dr. Miller, though I didn't footnote it, I don't think, for him. Or of him, to give him credit there. So, but when you think of narratives, let's just talk about John. When you think of narratives, every author writes a book of the Bible with an audience in view and a purpose in view. Now we're going back to Bible study. What's the message of the book? Who's the audience? What's the time? Grammatical, historical, literal hermeneutic we use, which is the best. And so I want to think in the times, who's John writing to? Ben, do you have just a feel for the book of the Gospel, John?
Well, it's I'm not sure if he wrote to a specific people group or area, but I know he wrote to um, so that the reader would believe that Jesus Christ,
Yeah,
in Jesus Christ.
yeah. Out of all the Gospel accounts, he's the one that tells us there, John 20, verses 30 and 31. Um, Thinking back through, now I'm just going to step back a second. Matthew, what kind of audience did he write to? Probably a Jewish audience. He wants to present Jesus as the Messiah, probably written before the fall of Jerusalem, 60s somewhere is what we say Matthew wrote. Probably the best conservative theory or decision or perspective. And he's marshaling information that for a Jewish person thinking Old Testament, Messiah, the kingdom, and law righteousness, what is Jesus? Well, he's the one who fulfilled the law. He's the king at the end there. Mark, who's Mark writing to? Probably a Greco-Roman world, slavery, the term doulos, the term immediately, which is what a slave, a servant would do, respond. And so here's the suffering servant who models how we should live, but who, and Mark's key verse is probably 10:45, who came to not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for us. So he served with his life. And it ends in sort of an interesting, there's a debate about the ending of Mark, that if it ends at probably what's the traditional ending, the women are in confusion. I think that's a good ending. There's some history to the other endings, but there's some questions with the other endings of Mark, because that's the quandary we're all in. It's before the destruction of Jerusalem. That book was written, and I think Mark, under Peter's authority as the apostolic authority for the writing of Mark, wrote to real life people that are struggling. So we look to Jesus to knowing how to suffer for God. Now, that's the negative. There's a positive there for sure. Yeah. Luke. All right, who's Luke written to? We're going to ask that question when we come back to the parables. So we can sort of set that aside, but yet he's probably more a Gentile audience, but a mix. Still a strong Jewish flavor to all the books, because that's where Christ is from. So John, now we step from before the destruction of Jerusalem, 70 AD, to after, because there's no mention of the destruction of Jerusalem, most think. probably written 85 to 95, somewhere along in there. And the world is more prominent, but yet it's got a real strong Jewish flavor to it. There's a lot of, right there in the introduction, you know what a chiasm is, Ben?
Can't remember right now, but I've heard
Okay,
of it.
you go to John 1, his prologue, and a chiasm is a Hebrew form of poetry. It has an A, B, C, B, A. So
Hmm.
you see a, a point and then a counterpoint at the end, and it's like working toward a center, and that center point in a chiasm is the main point of that section. And in the prologue, there have been some other theories about how to break out that chiasm, but probably the best understanding is John's saying the focus of my book is verses 12 and 13. And what's in 12 and 13 in the prologue? You know, that if you believe in his name, you'll become children of God, not by, oh, so there's this relational dynamic, belief in him. And then you hear the end of the gospel where he says, these things are written, these signs are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ. Now, what's a sign? Have you studied that? You gone through the Gospel of John in detail, Ben? What's
Not,
the
I mean, I went
sign?
through the New Testament overview class,
Okay, all right,
but
all right. Sometimes people have taken John. We don't do specific books as much as we used to back there, but I don't know. Is John even offered as a separate book? It might not be. I think we did that at the seminary for a number of years because I taught it there a few times. But
I thought
anyway,
they did like
John, go ahead.
either John or Romans. I know they did Romans, but I thought they did John.
Definitely, we do Romans. Daniel Revelation sometimes is another specific course that we have. I know we have it at the seminary. But John says these signs are written. So what's a sign? Semeion. It's a an incident that points to a truth. It points back and it points forward. So what are the signs? And then here's where the scholars look at the different signs. You chose chapter 5. Let's look there for a second. I don't know if he uses the word sign there. I think so. We look at the end of chapter 4, though. I don't have a recall that the word semeion is used there. In chapter 4, he came to Cana, and I'm looking at verse 46. John 4:46. So he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he'd met turned the water into wine. Ooh, cool. There's a structure from chapter 2 to chapter 4 at the end, and so he does a miracle there. And look at verse 54. John 4:54. This is now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. Now, probably the second sign that John sees is significant. You know, we put all the chronology together of all the gospels, and he probably did a lot more signs before this one. Chapter 2, just to go back and see what John is referring to there. Verse 11, this, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee. So there's an inclusio, is what it's called, from chapter 2 to chapter 4. Sort of some interesting things. But what are signs? We tend to focus them. Now, I'm just lecturing here on the Gospel of John because you're going to do a study. And to understand chapter 5, you almost have to have a feel for the whole book, guys. So whatever passages Eli and Ethan you all select, factor this into your thinking as you do your exegesis, that because the narrative that you're looking at is one of those signs that prove that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. All right. Now, there are probably 7, I say 8 signs. The 8th one is his resurrection that he talks about in chapter 2. But then there are 7 other miracles. But beyond that, there are miracle teaching. So there's a sense in which some of the conversations he has I think John is using them in a broad sense, though he never labels them a sign, like the conversation with the woman at the well, like the conversation with Nicodemus, the conversation with Pilate. Um, but yet you've got to ask the question now. Now, Ben, you're dealing with a passage that has a miracle in it, but Eli and Ethan, you're going to see some of these other passages. They don't have a miracle in them, but they're a narrative. They're a story. And what I think John's doing is, though it's appropriate to focus on the miracles, there's more signs. John selectively took conversations, times of teaching that point to truth. Let me use chapter 6, if you're familiar with chapter 6 here. At the beginning of it, he feeds 5,000. That's a miracle. That's a sign. He then gets out on the water. That's a miracle. That's a sign. He walks on the water. Then he does a long teaching. John has this long section at the end of John where he talks with the people about him being the manna that comes down of heaven. There's a big long chiasm in the middle of this one. It's really neat. Focuses on the center of it is the people grumbling at who Jesus is. Oh, cool. So he's trying to make a point, is what he's saying. The end of the chapter is sort of a conundrum when he talks about eat my flesh, drink my blood. How does that fit in? But that's all a sign to people with Jewish thinking that this is the Messiah, because a Jew would not say drink blood. So what is Jesus saying? All right, so what I'm trying to describe for all of us is not just the miracles. If you select one of the narrative passages that this is just Jesus interacting with some people, like the woman at the well, no miracle there, but yet Jesus is saying something to this woman that's a sign to the reader that Jesus is the Christ. Meaning in that story, there's something that points to Jesus, and it's clear when you study that passage. Maybe one of you would select. There's another option at the end. Jesus talking to Pilate. What does that have to do with anything? Well, there's a discussion about truth. And who's the truth? Chapter 14, verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So when Pilate's there saying, and Jesus says, I came for the truth, and Pilate sarcastically says, yeah, what is truth? And I don't know what tone of voice, but there's narration. The irony was truth was standing right in front of him. So the story has a point. When we come to narratives in the Bible and now narratives in John, what's the author's point? It's not just a story that we take a point out of it, go, well, Jesus was in the temple and he cleansed the temple. So Jesus is talking about worship. So we need to worship well. And okay, that's true. But there's more going on in that passage. That passage is a sign. Jesus talking about, destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days, that points to him as the Christ and how we can have life in his name. So keep what you said earlier, Ben, keep that in view at the end of the book. We've got to do it with the other books too. If we go and do a narrative passage or a teaching passage in Matthew, all right, how does this factor into him being the Messiah, the the Messiah, King of the Jews, and Mark, how is he a suffering servant, and Luke, how is he a son of man, and all right. So we see that message in the passage we're looking at. So Ben, you're looking at chapter 5. I've been rambling on here, just lecturing. Question, comment, stop me.
That's good.
All right, chapter 5.
Thanks.
There was a feast of the Jews. An interesting observation. John centers in the reader's mind the Jewish feasts. Sometimes he says out front, and he mentions the Passover. The Passover is significant to John. Remember in chapter 1 where John the Baptist sees Jesus and he says, hark, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And we wonder what lamb he's referring to. I think it's probably the Passover lamb. Not Yom Kippur, that was a goat. So here's the Passover lamb, but there's a discussion about that one. But here, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and he doesn't name the feast. Chapter 7, now I just was using this in a theology class this morning. Chapter 7, the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. Chapter 8, he seems to be talking about Hanukkah. Ooh, when did Hanukkah start and why did it start? And that's not a Hebrew feast in the Old Testament. All right, but I am the light of the world is what I'm thinking of, the Festival of Lights. But here he's saying, with that hint of a feast, somehow this is going to, and I say that tentative word, somehow this situation points to Jesus being a fulfillment of all these types. All right, that's part, but he didn't tell us what feast, so I don't know what type. So I can't conjecture. All right, he heals the man, makes some good observations, Ben, about what's going on in that interaction between Jesus and the man. So you're dealing with narrative. Some of the details of narrative are important. Some of them are just to advance a story. You, as the exegete, got to not make every detail walk on all fours, we say. That doesn't work. But yet, John chose details to help us see the story. That's narrative. But also to point to truth here. So you're going to go through the passage. You're going to see him heal. The interaction with the Jews is important there. In the teens, they come to him. They question the man about carrying his mat on the Sabbath. And, well, the guy who healed me, he said, pick it up. So I'm going to do that, But yet, did he really come to faith? Did he really believe in Jesus? That's one question that I ask in this passage. Even when he got healed, the focus is not on the man coming to faith. Jesus heals him before he even comes to faith. Why? That's what it seems like. Now, I've stopped, Ben, and I'm going to say it to everybody else. I made a selection to make up the list. As you look at this, you could stop at just the miracle of the healing the guy. He picked up his bed and walked in verse 9. But the narration of John goes on. It goes past that. In fact, I stopped it at 17, I think, but you could go through, look at the text there through 18. This is why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, he was even calling God his own father, making himself equal with God. 18 takes you back into the broader text of the book. So that's why I said, maybe you don't need to go that far, but you make the choice as the preacher, what you want to say. You only have 30 minutes, 35 minutes in a sermon. So decide how much to chew off and what point, even though there's sub-points. Like I was talking about the outlines, you got 3 points. Well, each point is almost an outline in itself. If you have a lot of time to go through John, maybe you'd want to break it down in little parts, in those sub-thought units, but maybe you want to step back and deal with that whole thought unit, the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda and the Jewish response. That'd be the broader context. So you've got to get into the study this week, Ben, and think about it. Now, let me just share the other passages here. Now, I wish Eli and Ben were on so we could look at the other passages together, just to make sure Eli and Ethan, as you look through them. John the Baptist, chapter 1. Now, let me ask, Ben, can you see, am I sharing correctly? You can see the list?
Yeah, I can see it.
All right. So for all of us, let's think through the Gospel of John here, the prologue, verses 1 to 18. He presents Jesus as the creator, God. In the beginning were the Word was with God, the Word was God. What's verse 18? Remember I said it was the chiasm? A, that should be A primed. No one's seen God at any time, but the only begotten God. Oh, wow. Then you look there's John the Baptist, beginning and end. There's light, there's the focus on the people, but those who accepted him. So I think that's the center point. That's John's point. The rest of chapter 1 presents some titles that Jesus, he's the Messiah, he's the King, he's the chosen one, 7 different titles. But now here's the focus. Who is John the Baptist? And an interesting discussion there in chapter 1, verses 19, an interaction between John the Baptist and the religious leaders. And verse 19, 20, we hear a negative, a Trinitarian denial. If somebody chooses this passage, why did John include this negative with John the Baptist? I think to make the focus down on he's not the Christ, he's not the Christ, he's not the Christ, because you hear John the Baptist, religious leaders come to him and they said, "Are you the Messiah?" "No, I am not." "Well, then are Elijah?" "No." And the final one is, it's just sort of an exclamation. It's just getting quicker and quicker, saying, "I'm not the guy." Well, then the question is, well, who are you and where is he? And then the rest of the chapter opens up there, the meeting of the disciples. In between, there's a discussion, verses 28 through 34, about John and him meeting Jesus. And I chose not to, that's more teaching. But there's interaction with the religious leaders here. There's a narrative, and you need to feel the drama that's going on. Now here's a narrative with the disciples meeting Jesus in 35 to 42, a number of disciples. And a key point, if you select that one, is you're going to hear them seeking the Messiah. But then you're going to hear a shift to Jesus seeking and finding. So not only are people seeking him, Jesus is seeking them. There's a key, interesting thing. Then the Nathaniel under the tree. Well, with a narrative, you want to describe the story, what's going on, help us to see the truth of why that story's there, not just details about it, but why it's being told, but yet feel the real feelings. Like when Jesus, says, Nathaniel says, "Well, how'd you see me? How do you know me? We've never met." He said, "While you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Well, what does that mean? Can you imagine the feelings, the response of Nathaniel there? And then what's going on? Some neat things. The narrative of turning water into wine and just the details there, the stone water jars. And why does John mention them for purification? Well, again, there's something Jewish, ceremonial that's not perfect, but Jesus came to provide the perfect. The cleansing of the temple. Boy, there's drama going on here in the interplay between the people. In a narrative, you want to capture the drama, help us to see the story, but then for sure, help us to see the point of the story. Conversation with the woman at the well. You could take that a long ways through the chapter, but I chose it just as this section where he's just meeting her. He says, almost sounds like a Jewish pickup line. "Babe, if you knew the gift in front of you, or you'd ask me." Well, no, it's not a Jewish pickup line. He's using a Samaritan expression. If you knew the gift of God, and to a Samaritan, that meant the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. So if you really knew Torah, you'd want me to give you water that really satisfies. See, there's a point going on here. 46, see, there's another part of the story you could tell, but I focused down to the healing of the royal official's son there. Interesting observation. They all came out. Looks like they're wanting to meet Jesus, but the term he used for receive, as many as received him, chapter 1, verse 12. Receive him in his name there in John 30, I think it's lambano. The word lambano is not in that the people in his hometown received him. No, it's more they welcomed him. It's more like, "Hey, Ethel, let's go out and see the miracle worker." It's not a real incorporating into our life, receiving him. And in this narrative, a detail in the text, the man comes, "Could you heal my son?" Comes from Capernaum, and it comes around the lake there on the north side. And Jesus turns to the crowd. A good translation shows the detail. If you really wanted to know the truth. I'm highly paraphrasing. And the you is a plural. He's not talking back at the man that wants his son healed. He's talking to the crowd. Wow, what a detail. Why is that going on? And then the focus is on the man saying, when did my son get well? Then he knew when Jesus said the word. See, a story is telling a point about Jesus. When he says the word, wow. And so here you have the paralytic. We talked about that, the multiplying the loaves of fish story, which then goes on to the rest of the chapter. Yeah, skipping over that miracle in the middle, but there's not much narrative to it. The woman caught in adultery. Question about whether this passage should be in the Gospel of John, but I think it's a true thing that Jesus did. Shows the compassion of Christ, and boy, the drama, the interplay. They try to corner him. Raising the dead man Lazarus, strong narrative, long passage. Mary anointing Jesus, the perfume, and Lazarus there. Wow, what an interplay between the people, the disciples. Conversation with Pilate the first time, the crucifixion, skipping over the second narrative at the beginning of chapter 19. The resurrection, meeting the women, meeting Mary, Thomas, after the other disciples met Christ. Then around the sea with all the disciples. And then finally, Peter, do you love me? And just the drama that's there, that three-part affirmation of Jesus' restoration after his three-part denial earlier in the gospel. All right, I've quickly gone through it all just for everybody to see. Preach the narrative, the story, but help us to see the point of the story and accomplish John's purpose. Keep those all in mind as you do your exegesis. First, we'll come back and talk about it next week. And if you step toward and have time to do an outline, present it, and we'll talk that through a little bit too. That'll be the gist of next week, and then we'll talk a little bit about editing and revising. Then take a break and come back and preach on the 24th, Tuesday the 24th. All right, I did all the talking. Ben, question? Shut out the Sherry there.
I don't think I have any questions, but it's,
Question about your passage, maybe? No.
I need to look at how to. I don't think I've preached a narrative before, so that'll
Good.
be new.
Give you a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. I don't think I have any questions. I'll just look at the book, and he covers
Okay.
narrative a little bit there, and
Okay.
maybe hear a couple narrative sermons.
Yeah, look at the handout on narratives.
Okay.
It's got some good suggestions. They're good things to keep in mind. When we approach a narrative passage, for all of us, go open up that handout there, and it's in the outline link there in Canvas. Well, guys, let me know any questions you have. If not, have a good week, and we'll meet back online next Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Have a good week.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
You
Bye-bye.
too.